But then she said, but look at the turkey legs. You can't win. But there are some ways you really can win. People often say, what went behind starting Aitz Hayim? And now, I think today, I have a very, very, very simple answer. To create a synagogue that Harold Ramis would want to be a part of. We're going to create a movie, a story on multiple levels at the same time.
Okay.
Do we have a secretary who can read that?
Aaron may know, but first of all, I had never joined a congregation. I took my bar mitzvah as a signal that I no longer had to attend anything. That I was now fully empowered as a Jewish adult and therefore had no obligation to anybody. I'm going to say something special. And then we moved to Chicago, and I think Aaron was the first person I met who was an Aitz Hayim member. We met through media, and then we connected through religion. We've discovered we've all food. Well, we discovered, I mentioned a writer named Karen Armstrong, and Aaron said, I'm having dinner with her next week. Because Aaron knows everybody, of course. And we ended up he brought me to dinner, and she's writes on religion and comparative religion, and the conversation deepened, and then we became very good friends with Sam and Debbie Oakner, Erica and I, and their kids, and our kids matched up really well. And their son Dylan was having a bar mitzvah. They had it at the Highland Park outdoors, and it was wonderful. The service was incredible, and then I think the next high holidays we went and met Mark and Erwin, and we felt we were home, just intellectually, spiritually, everything. The practice was totally diverse, all-inclusive, post-denominational, everything that we favor. So I picked up some valuable lessons that you'll see are incorporated into the film. But after, essentially, the most powerful service I recall was right after 9/11. Rosh Hashanah came right on the heels of 9/11. We had been in New York, and not at Ground Zero certainly, but we were witnesses from Brooklyn. Basically, we were at LaGuardia on the way to LaGuardia when the first plane hit. We watched the second plane hit through the windows.
We saw it on television in real life at the same time.
There was a TV in front of us and the skyline of Manhattan. We saw the image and the real event happening at the same time. And then we went on a little odyssey through Brooklyn and went through Williamsburg. On the way to, we found shelter at a friend of my daughter's apartment, and on the way to her apartment we passed through Williamsburg, and people were streaming across the Williamsburg Bridge covered in dust, and a scene you never thought you'd see in America. It was out of a Steven Spielberg movie. And I seen him walking around with, the Streimels and the payas and the beards, and I thought, what an amazing mental photograph this is, the victims of the event and the people who, on some level, to fundamentalist Islam, are the cause of the event. So I started thinking a lot about the fundamentalisms and orthodoxies that kind of have driven world conflict for a very long time, and drive a deep-seated internal conflict we all have. Is life meaningful? Is it purposeful? Is there a creator and a God who watches over us and actually cares about what we do? Or have we generated all that as a response to uncertainty in the world? The words that stuck with me from that Rosh Hashanah were Erwin, two things. One was in the Chet. He said, forgive me for the sin of this, for the sin of that. And he was being funny sometimes. Forgive me for the sin of swearing at the driver in front of me. And then he said, forgive me for the sin of not recognizing the humanity of the Palestinian people. I thought, that's something I never thought I'd hear in a synagogue. And it was just part of just seemed to be part of the logic and the intellectual base of this congregation, the political orientation. And the two things I'd always taught my kids before coming to Aitz Hayim, as we did Passover, which was the only ritual we really observed, was that it seemed to me that Judaism came down to two basic concepts: freedom represented by the Exodus, and justice represented by the giving of the law. Freedom and justice. But from an early age, I thought these are things my kids can understand. Personal freedom, political freedom, justice on every level. So with those two core concepts driving my kind of morality, I thought I would address this notion of, Erwin saw the film in New York and embraced me and said, thanks for deconstructing the notion of chosenness. But basically, what ended up in the creative process, first I was going to, am I going too long?
No.
First thing, the studio said, I thought I would track through Genesis and see how we got where we are. Because Genesis, I think the Plaut Torah says that Genesis starts off as mythology, then becomes legend, and then becomes history. And really, there is no history. Even Abraham is not historical in any sense we think of academically, because the only, I think, recorded reference to Abraham is, I think, when he bought a burial plot, or a cave. He bought 2 spots in a cave, for presumably for Sarah and him. So, I figure, all right, it's legend. And that allows me to kind of compress the timeline of Genesis, because what I wanted to do was go from the Garden of Eden, man living in a state of total innocence, to civilization. I intended to go all the way to Ur, where Abraham was theoretically born, which would have put us in Mesopotamia, Sumerian culture, some beginnings of Babylon. But it just seemed, once I decided I was going to actually have Abraham in the film, and because the circumcision was irresistible, I just loved the idea of the film that Sodom would represent urban civilization. And of course, everything in the early part of Genesis makes it sound like civilization is the worst. It's the descendants of Cain who go off and found civilization. And everything with it, architecture, engineering, animal husbandry, agriculture, music. It doesn't sound so bad, but it wasn't lost on me that the second story in the Torah is murder. It's like, watching, CSI or something, people always said Shakespeare began every play with a murder. So it seemed like, all right, so when the studio said, what's the movie about? I said, I'm going to track the psychosocial development of civilization through the Old Testament. They said, we can't really put that on a poster. But